The Soviet Union must pay a concrete price.
History is often filled with unbelievable moments, right? I mean, who doesn't love a jaw-dropping story? But sometimes, events that are so shocking occur, and they make you question everything you thought you knew. Today, let's dive into the 20 most shocking events in Soviet Russia. 1. Yuri Gagarin's spaceflight, 1961. How about a trip back to April 12, 1961?
Man in space to the show.
That was when Yuri Gagarin blasted off into the stars, making history as the first person to travel into outer space. The Cold War was at its peak, and the space race between the Soviet Union and the United States was heating up. Everyone was trying to one-up each other in technological leaps, and space exploration was the ultimate playground. So there went Gagarin aboard the Vostok 1, lifting off from Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. The mission? Just a quick spin around the Earth, lasting a mere 108 minutes, but wow, did it leave a mark? This was a major bragging point for the Soviets, showing off their tech skills big time. And Yuri, oh Yuri. This guy was a senior lieutenant in the Soviet Air Force, picked for his smarts and, believe it or not, because he was pretty compact, standing at 5 feet 2 inches, perfect for the snug confines of the Vostok 1 capsule. It was a tight fit, but it had everything he needed to survive out there in the great unknown. The world held its breath early that morning as he rocketed up. The mission had its nail-biting moments, especially when it came to the precise timing needed for a safe re-entry. But get this, Gagarin didn't just ride his capsule back to Earth. He ejected and parachuted down to the ground, landing safely near Saratov, Russia. His epic orbit fired up the space race even more, pushing President John F. Kennedy to vow he'd get a man on the moon before the 60s were out. And guess what? He did. Apollo 11, 1969. Boom! But let's not forget it all started with Yuri's stellar adventure. 2. Launching of Sputnik. Back on October 4th, 1957, the Soviet Union literally launched us into the space age with Sputnik 1, the first artificial satellite to ever orbit Earth. It was a shiny metal sphere about the size of a beach ball, zooming around Earth. It was 58 centimeters in diameter, weighed a hefty 83.6 kilograms, and sported 4 external radio antennas that sent radio pulses zipping through space. This little globe circled the Earth on an elliptical path, making a full loop every 98 minutes. This was no small feat. The world, especially the United States, was taken aback by this demonstration of the Soviet Union's rocket prowess. It wasn't just about who got into space first. It kicked off the space race, a fierce showdown between the US and the Soviet Union to push the boundaries of space exploration. While Sputnik 1 was up there, sending back crucial scientific data, scientists used its radio signals to probe the upper atmosphere's density and to study how radio waves behaved in the ionosphere. These signals kept coming for 22 days until the satellite's batteries died. Eventually, Sputnik 1 met its fiery end upon re-entering Earth's atmosphere on January 4, 1958, after completing 1,440 orbits. 3. Pavlov's dog experiments. Can you believe that way back in the early 20th century, Ivan Pavlov was making waves in Soviet Russia with his experiments on dogs? It all started with a simple observation during his studies on digestion. Pavlov noticed that dogs more than drooled over their food. They began salivating at the sight of his lab assistants. This sparked a whole new investigation into what's now known as classical conditioning. Every time he fed the dogs, Pavlov would ring a bell. After a few rounds, the sound of that bell had the dogs drooling, even without any food in sight. They had learned to link the bell to mealtime. This was a big deal because it shook up the old idea that behaviors were innate reflexes. Now, it wasn't all smooth sailing. Pavlov's methods, like surgically modifying dogs to study their saliva better or keeping them in strict conditions, definitely wouldn't pass today's ethical muster. Despite the controversy, there's no denying that Pavlov's insights into learning and behavior have left a lasting impact, teaching us just how much our surroundings influence what we do. 4. The 1980 Moscow Olympics boycott.
The Soviet Union must pay a concrete price.
Yesterday, Vice President Mondale said the Summer Olympics should be moved from Moscow.
I would not support the sending of an American team to the Olympics.
Back in December 1979, the Soviet Union decided to invade Afghanistan. This move didn't sit well with the US President Jimmy Carter, who reacted quickly. He threw down an ultimatum: pull out by February 20th, 1980, or we're not coming to the 1980 Moscow Olympics Games. The deadline came and went, and the Soviets were still there. So, Carter stuck to his guns and called for a boycott, urging other countries to stand with him. What followed was extraordinary. Not just a few, but 65 countries decided to skip the Olympics, marking it as the largest Olympic boycott ever. While the UK, France, and Australia were on board with showing their disapproval, they left it up to their athletes to make the call.
The Olympic Committee voted to boycott the Summer Olympic Games in Moscow.
Now think about the athletes. Years of sweat and dreams on the line, all caught up in this political tug-of-war. Many felt crushed, torn between their Olympic dreams and the world's political dramas. Despite the boycott, the Olympics went ahead with 80 nations, but the vibe was off. The absence of many top contenders cast a long shadow over the Games, reminding everyone that sports and politics are sometimes more intertwined than we'd like, defining a crucial chapter in the saga of the Cold War. The Moscow Metro opening, 1935. Stepping back to May 15, 1935, when the Moscow Metro first zoomed into action, we saw a shimmering symbol of Soviet Russia's engineering and urban development prowess. This was far beyond just a subway system. It was a sprawling network of underground railways stretching over 11 kilometers, 6.8 miles, with 13 gleaming stations, from Sokolniki Station all the way to Park Kultury Station, cruising right past the Kremlin's storied walls. But hold on, it got even more fascinating. The Moscow metro stations were decked out like grand palaces, complete with marble walls, soaring ceilings, and sparkling chandeliers. Each station was a tribute to Soviet values and history, turning a simple commute into a walk through a luxurious gallery. Before long, the metro became vital to the city, bustling with millions of passengers every day. The metro wasn't just about getting from A to B, it was a powerful symbol of propaganda, demonstrating Soviet strides in urban planning and public transport. Constructed by the hands of thousands of workers, its completion was hailed as a victory of socialist labor and collective achievement. Stalin's personality cult. How about a glimpse into one of the most intense personality cults in history? We're talking about Joseph Stalin's era in Soviet Russia, which ran from the late 1920s all the way to his death in 1953. This cult was an all-out, countrywide phenomenon, crafted through relentless propaganda, heavy censorship, and, believe it or not, rewriting history itself. Stalin's cult started picking up steam in the 1930s, right after Lenin's death in 1924. Positioning himself as Lenin's right-hand man and the natural successor, Stalin was everywhere. His face was plastered on every wall, from public buildings to people's living rooms. Statues and books praised him as the father of nations, a brilliant mind, and a wise leader who could do no wrong. Stalin's crew even tweaked photos and historical documents to make sure he looked like the hero in any scenario. This was about making Stalin look good, as well as keeping him in absolute power, quashing any whispers of dissent and spreading a thick air of fear. Criticize him? That would be a no-go unless you were up for some serious consequences. the construction of the BM, Baikal-Amur Main Line. There is a mammoth project hidden deep in the annals of Soviet Russia, the Baikal-Amur Main Line, BM. It was more than a stretch of railway, but an epic 4,324 kilometers slicing through the wild heart of eastern Siberia and the Russian Far East. Built parallel to the older Trans-Siberian Railway, BAM was the brainchild of Soviet ambitions in 1974 under the watchful eyes of Leonid Brezhnev. Dubbed the construction project of the century, aside from laying down tracks, it was about making a strategic leap. These were brutal, almost inhuman conditions, with young Komsomol members and even Gulag prisoners pushing through mountains, forging rivers, and building over 4,200 bridges and 21 tunnels, some among Russia's longest. But there was a twist. Despite the severe challenges, BAM became a magnet for those drawn by higher wages and the promise of better living conditions. The Moscow Show Trials. Have you ever heard about the Moscow Show Trials between 1936 and 1938? Well, it was quite the drama in Soviet Russia, all directed by none other than Joseph Stalin himself. He was on a mission called the Great Purge, aiming to clear out any opposition lurking within the Communist Party. It's like he was cleaning a house, but in a very extreme way. These trials were actually a big deal because they targeted the big shots of the Communist Party, especially those who had been around since the Russian Revolution. These were the guys who knew the ins and outs of the party, the old Bolsheviks. Then came the Trial of the 17 in January 1937, where Karl Radek and Yuri Pyatakov took center stage. They were accused of plotting all sorts of sabotage and espionage. The outcome was pretty grim, with 13 people executed and the rest sent off to labor camps. Nikita Khrushchev's corn campaign. Guess what happened when Nikita Khrushchev decided to bring American-style corn farming to Soviet Russia in the mid-1950s? He started what became known as the Corn Campaign, aiming to transform Soviet agriculture with this golden grain. After visiting the United States in 1959 and being wowed by Iowa's cornfields, Khrushchev came back all fired up, ready to dub corn as the second bread for the Soviet people. The enthusiasm was palpable. Corn acreage rocketed from 4.3 million to a whopping 18 million hectares in just the first year. Thanks to some lucky sunny spells, the initial yields looked promising. But the Soviet climate wasn't exactly Iowa. Much of the land was just not cut out for corn, and without the right tools or tricks up their sleeves, like proper irrigation or the right farming equipment, the dream quickly turned sour. Massive losses and a food shortage that the already struggling Soviet agricultural system could barely handle. The Stakhanovite movement. A miner named Alexei Stakhanov, back in 1935, mined an unbelievable 102 tons of coal in just under 6 hours, 14 times more than what he was supposed to. This sparked a whole movement in the Soviet Union called the Stakhanovite movement, aimed at supercharging worker productivity. The Soviet government was all over this, turning it into a major publicity stunt to inspire workers across the nation. They launched a massive campaign urging everyone to smash their production quotas as part of a bigger push to speed up industrialization. Workers were encouraged to pick up new production techniques and compete to outdo each other. Those who did well were treated like stars. Think bonuses, swanky housing, and loads of public applause. Stakhanov became a celebrity, bagging awards and landing on Time magazine's cover in 1935, symbolizing the Soviet Union's industrial might. But not everyone was on board with this hyper-productive vibe. Many workers felt the heat from the ramped-up demands and didn't appreciate the extra pressure to break records. The whole Stakhanovite craze sometimes messed up the workflow, leading to inefficiencies and slowdowns. Over time, criticism mounted, and during the period of de-Stalinization, It came out that Stakhanov's record-breaking performance wasn't all him. The Berlin blockade, 1948 to 1949. After World War II, Germany was divided into 4 zones, each managed by one of the big winners of the war: the US, the UK, France, and the Soviet Union. Berlin was also split among these powers in the heart of Soviet-controlled Germany. But things got tense in 1948 when the Western Allies decided to introduce a new currency, the Deutschmark, in their zones, including their slice of Berlin. They didn't check in with the Soviets, and well, the Soviets weren't too thrilled. Feeling slighted, the Soviets threw a major curveball on June 24, 1948. They blocked all the roads, rails, and canals leading into West Berlin. Their plan? It made life so tough for the folks in West Berlin that the Western Allies would just give up and leave. However, the Western Allies had a different plan. They weren't about to let West Berlin go hungry, so they started the Berlin airlift 2 days later, on June 26th. This whole ordeal cemented the division between East and West Germany, set the stage for NATO, and cranked up the tension for the Cold War. The Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962. Soviet Russia, feeling a bit cornered by US missiles in Turkey and Italy, plus a botched invasion of Cuba by the US, decided to sneak some nuclear missiles into Cuba. Yep, just 90 miles away from the US shores. In October 1962, US spy planes caught a glimpse of these missile sites, brewing trouble. President John F. Kennedy wasn't about to let this slide. He huddled up with his top advisors, the Executive Committee of the National Security Council, EXCOM, to figure out a game plan. On October 28th, Khrushchev broadcasted the decision to dismantle the missiles, and just like that, the crisis was averted. This nail-biter not only highlighted the perils of nuclear gamesmanship, but also led to better hotline chats between the US and Soviet leaders to dodge future showdowns. The Sino-Soviet split. Did you know the Sino-Soviet split turned friends into foes back in the late 1950s and 1960s? It was a big shake-up in the world of global politics, impacting everything from the communist movement to the Cold War drama. The Soviet Union and China, 2 big-time allies, started to drift apart. They couldn't agree on the real essence of Marxism-Leninism, especially after Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev decided to mellow things down with the West after Stalin's era. This rough patch pushed China to make nice deals with the United States, leading to an iconic moment, President Nixon's visit in 1972. Soviet industrial espionage. Imagine diving into a world where the Cold War isn't just about spies in trench coats, but a high-stakes game of stealing the hottest tech secrets. That's right, we're talking about Soviet industrial espionage, and boy, was it a game changer. The Soviets were on a mission to bridge a massive tech gap, especially in nuclear technology, aerospace, and advanced manufacturing. It's like they were in a race where the prize was the global balance of power, and they were bent on winning. Take the Manhattan Project. It sounds like something out of a spy thriller, right? Soviet spies, including the infamous Klaus Fuchs and the controversial duo Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, got their hands on some of the most classified nuclear secrets. This was the kind of information that helped the Soviet Union fast-track its atomic bomb by 1949. But why stop at nuclear secrets? The Soviets had their eyes on everything from computer tech to aerospace innovations during the 1960s and 70s. Their espionage network was like a giant web stretching across the West, snagging every technological tidbit they could find. One of their slick moves, swiping computer technology that allowed them to mirror and maybe even one-up the West. This whole espionage saga went far beyond making the tech race more intense. It forced the US and its buddies to up their security game big time. The KGB's influence. Did you know the KGB was like the backstage boss of Soviet Russia from 1954 to 1991? It wasn't just any agency, it was the powerhouse of domestic security, spying and keeping everyone in line. Basically, the heart of Soviet control and fear. Back then, the KGB took the baton from old-school squads like the Cheka and NKVD. Under big names like Yuri Andropov, it became a super sleuth agency, keeping an eye on both domestic matters and international scenes to protect Soviet state secrets and their communist way of life. At home, they were the ultimate watchdogs. Think about it. Surveillance cameras, wiretaps, and even your neighbor could have been spying on you. They were all about squashing any whiff of dissent. Intellectuals and thinkers who didn't toe the line, like Boris Pasternak and Alexander Solzhenitsyn, often found themselves in hot water, facing jail or worse. Globally, these guys were playing a whole different game. They sneaked into Western governments and top industries, swiping secrets left and right. Their toolbox, spy crafts, sneaky disinformation campaigns. The KGB didn't stop there. They were masters of propaganda, pushing Soviet agendas worldwide and stoking the fires of global politics. Which event surprised you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this video intriguing, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel for more fascinating content like this, and hit the bell icon to stay updated. Thanks for watching and see you next time.